Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurtzbacher, and today we are going to talk about answering the call to adventure in your own backyard. Our guest is Matt Snyder, and he's an entrepreneur, father, husband, and of course, an adventurer. Over 15 years ago, Matt became disenfranchised with corporate America and decided to take things in a little different direction. He's now the co-owner of Winestore, headquartered here in Charlotte, a rapidly growing retail wine merchant that opened its first store in 2006 and is currently up to 8 stores across North Carolina. Matt was born and raised in Elkin, North Carolina, and adventure runs deep in his blood. Today, he's going to talk about how adventure was part of his childhood, how he continues to answer its call as an adult, and how his adventure spirit has helped him grow his very successful venture, Winestore. Matt, my friend, welcome to the campfire.
Thanks, Scott. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, man. Well, I tell you, just for our listeners, do you mind just giving us just a quick overview of the life of Matt Snyder here in Charlotte? What does day-to-day look like for you?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I'm the co-owner of Winestore. We're a small wine retail, kind of small chain based here in Charlotte. We've got 8 stores across North Carolina, kind of stretching from Asheville all the way to Wilmington with 3 here in Charlotte and a few in the Triangle as well. So that takes up a good amount of my day-to-day time. I've got a great family here, my wife Margaret and my son Roan and my daughter Caroline. So with sports and all kinds of outdoor stuff going on, that's pretty much me. So working and then trying to get outside as much as possible. Those are my things.
Yeah. So all of that going on, you have a super busy life. You're an entrepreneur, you have a business, a family, you got young kids, but yet adventure it runs deep with you. And, I always see posts on your social media of different trips that you're on, whether it's a hunting trip or a trip with your family, or always seem to be making adventure a priority. And I'm just curious, A, how do you fit that into your busy lifestyle? And, B, like, what is it that calls you to make sure to make the time for those things?
Yeah, sure. So I'm very much a person, like, I like routine. I like schedule. I think, most folks, get themselves into a pattern of work and life and, doing the things that you do on a normal basis. For me, what truly makes me happy is finding time to kind of like get outside those normal patterns. I think, what really makes me happy is finding adventure locally. Like maybe it's in your backyard, maybe it's in, we live in, or I live and you live in this wonderful state of North Carolina, and there's just so much to offer. And I feel like even I'm 42 years old, I just haven't even scratched the surface of finding, adventure right here where we live.
There's so much here in this beautiful state, and you've seen a lot of it. So can you talk to us about just like some of maybe the more recent adventures that you've done here in North Carolina? I know you have a couple of things that you do sort of as tradition, and then you've done some other things, but like, just again, for context, what are some of the kinds of adventures that you like to take?
Yeah. So I grew up, as you mentioned, in Elkin, North Carolina. I grew up in actually a little community right outside of Elkin called State Road, North Carolina. And that little community is about 20 minutes from the Blue Ridge Parkway. So you think like kind of, an hour and 20 minutes west of Winston-Salem, like heading northwest. There you have Stone Mountain State Park, you have Doughton Park, you've got all these great places to visit, which are within a couple hours drive of Charlotte. Stone Mountain State Park is near and dear to my heart. It's actually a granite bald, they call it. So it's an exposed granite mountain that you can hike from top to bottom in half a day. Great camping up there. There's fly fishing. So Stone Mountain is definitely near and dear to me. Another place that I visit regularly is a little spot called Lake Tahoma. and that's near Marion, North Carolina. My mother has some property there, and there's about 30 houses surrounding a small lake, and the property is about 5,000 acres that is shared amongst those 30 homeowners. So, and it's a cutout of Pisgah National Forest. So you've got hiking, you've got, great fishing, boating, camping. Like it's wonderful. So, those are my two places I probably visit on, the most regularly. But as I was saying before, like, I haven't even scratched the surface in North Carolina. Like, I'm always trying to find that next adventure. I've got one coming up here in May. I'm hiking Mount LeConte, which is another one of my favorites. It's in the Great Smoky Mountain National Forest. It's the Park Service runs a group of little cabins right on top of Mount LeConte. So every October, I think it's October 1st, you can put in for the lottery system to get a one-night stay on top of Mount LeConte. So you hike up in the morning, you stay up on the top of the mountain in these cabins, and it's, hand pumped water. Llamas carry all of the supplies up from the bottom of the mountain. So it's really a really super cool thing that, like, not a lot of folks know about it. Like, this is like 3.5 hours from Charlotte. Like, it's a really neat adventure. So I'm really looking forward to doing that in May.
You got me really pumped about that one, because you know that I went and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro recently, and we had porters there. And when I heard that you have porters called llamas on Mount LeConte, that's pretty cool. I love that. What a cool experience. I had no idea that was even a thing. And you got me all excited about doing that. But that's one of the trips that you've been doing regularly.
Yeah. So I have done that several times, and it's really, like, you talk about, like, breaking out of your normal kind of like environment and pattern. I was looking, I'm going in the first week in May, and it can still snow up on top of the mountain in May, which you think about in North Carolina, like, how can that be? How can it be 80 or 90 degrees at the bottom of the mountain and then a high of 40 when you get to the top? So it's pretty neat. I mean, it's definitely a kind of out of the norm experience.
Yeah, it's definitely on my list, and it sounds like it's a pretty hard to get. You said you had to get on the phone.
Literally speed dial. Yes, you got to put them on speed dial, and I track every year. I track how many times I have to call before I get through. And this year I called 110 times before
110 times
before I got through.
Man. Yeah. So who do you do this trip with? Is this something you take your family? Is it something you do solo?
Yeah. So in the past, it's been my brother and our mutual friend, Lon. It's kind of going to be on a 3-guy trip. This year, I'm taking my buddy, Will Lavender, on the trip. Okay. So, and he's really looking forward to it as well. I think, with how strenuous the hiking is, because I think there's 4 or 5 different routes to the top. The one we take is probably the shortest, so you get the most time spent on top of the mountain. I want to get up there and hang out. I'll probably wait another year or 2 before I take the kids, just because it's no joke.
Strenuous hike. Yeah. It sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I'm super pumped.
Yep.
So, in some of these experiences that you've talked about, that you've kind of made a regular thing in your life, I heard you specifically point out multiple times hiking, camping, and fishing.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing those are the activities in the mountains and in the woods that you like to do the most. And I'm curious, like, what happens to you when you're in that environment?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's important to note too, like, I started at a really young age, growing up where I did in kind of rural North Carolina, had all of these great places and activities to take advantage of right out my back door. I really started in, like, mountain biking and whitewater kayaking were like my first 2, like, loves at a really young age. I got my first kind of real mountain bike when I was 12. I got my first kayak when I was 14. And I would go on these, kayaking trips and mountain biking trips, all here in North Carolina, and then some in, like, West Virginia. But those were my favorite activities. And as I got older, I kind of, like, I didn't have a lot of time to maybe take a weekend trip to do a kayaking trip. Like, I would try to find activities that were more readily available. And that turned into fishing and hiking and camping and things like that.
So help me out here. If I'm reading this, like these were things that were really near and dear to you as a kid. And to some extent, as an adult, we're just trying to pull that inner child back out and be able to go
That's
do
right.
some of those things that you love so much. So Matt, I mean, with that, let's go to childhood. Let's
Yeah,
talk about that.
sure.
Because you had some pretty awesome experiences in
Yeah.
the woods as a kid that you were telling me about.
When we talked before the show about what kind of what my story was, like what that part of my life meant to me, like I took a step back and I spent several days like really kind of going back through my childhood experiences and my memories, and kind of came to this realization like, whoa, maybe my childhood was a little different than a lot of other guys, and or maybe
Yeah.
girls too. I growing up in the middle of nowhere, my parents like gave me a pretty big leeway to like go out and explore.
Yeah.
I would, at the age of 10, I was going out in the morning, packing a backpack full of gear, going out hiking, exploring. It's rural.
Yeah.
There's mountains, there's cow pastures, there's, all these different places that you can explore. And, I'm going out, I'm making a campfire, I'm cooking, I'm staying out till, you know, right at dusk, right before I know I'm going to probably get in trouble, and I'm hightailing it back to the house.
Yeah.
So these are normal experiences. Like I really felt comfortable by myself out in the woods. That was really, really special to me. And I would do some hunting. My parents, allowed me to hunt a little bit. And, it was really neat. From there, that kind of like childlike wonder of being out in the woods, it really started with a movie I saw. My mom would let me rent a movie from the public library from time to time.
Nice.
The movie was called My Side of the Mountain, and so I took this movie home, and it's all about this kid who kind of like, lives in New York City, is kind of tired of the hustle and bustle, runs away to his grandfather's property in the Catskill Mountains and lives off the land. And he's like lives in this hollowed out tree. So I'm thinking to myself, 10 years old, whoa, this is really cool. I got to
Yeah.
do something like this. And so that's when I started kind of going out and exploring my local area. And it was neat. Like it kind of set the tone for my life, for my outdoor pursuits.
Yeah, you actually had texted that to me this morning, and I looked it up. So I think it was like 1967. Is that right?
Yeah. The public library wasn't exactly carrying the new titles.
Some of the best movies though. My Side of the Mountain, 1967. You can bet my family's going to be watching it. But
Yeah.
you and I were together recently, and you kind of painted a visual. You said that you would go out in the morning and you'd stay out all day, and
Mhm.
your parents gave you a lot of leeway. You did some hunting, but one thing that you shared with me is like you actually would take a rifle with you as a 10-year-old kid
Yeah.
out into the woods. And
Yeah.
I think today some parents would be like, oh,
Yeah.
but
That's
I
right.
mean, this was, and so like you're out in the woods by yourself
Yeah.
with a rifle. Just, I mean, I gotta believe that like this was a huge confidence builder for you, and it's something that kind of helped you. It's funny because yesterday when I told my wife that you and I were having this conversation, I told her that story, and the first thing that she said is she goes, "Oh, it sounds like the Hunger Games."
That's
I'm like,
right.
yeah, it kind of is Katniss Everdeen going out in the woods, but it's Matt Snyder doing the same. But
Yeah.
what did that do for your sort of confidence and your own belief in yourself when you're out in the woods like that?
Sure. I think it taught me that I'd be comfortable in my own skin, that I could spend time in my own thoughts and by myself, and really and be okay with that. I think, this day and age, there are a lot of things in the world that maybe cause kids anxiety, right? My way of dealing with the pressures of being a kid, or the anxiety of things I encountered in my childhood, were to go outside. That was breaking that pattern of, you know, stuff I dealt with as a kid, and not bad things, but just, pressures that kids feel like,
Yeah.
am I accepted by my peers at school? Am I going to be good at sports? Am I going to be good at maybe at a musical instrument band? Like, those, when I got out in the woods, that was my way of calming down and de-stressing, and taking all that anxiety out of my life, being able to lay back. I mean, I can remember a very vivid memory of, within a few miles, like I'd built a little shelter, made a little fire, and I just was leaned back and just staring up at the trees. And it was mid-fall, and the trees were just swaying back and forth,
Mhm.
and it was complete peace. And I think I think that memory is so strong with me. I think I'm constantly chasing that feeling in my adult life.
Complete,
That inner
complete peace.
peace.
Complete peace. It is. It
Yeah,
is. And so here's something that I heard you say that I loved. You talked about I would be out in the woods. You said in my own skin and
yeah,
in my own thoughts.
yeah.
And like I feel like that's profound in today's day and age because I think a lot of us are not comfortable in our own skin and
Sure.
not comfortable in our own thoughts. And the way that we avoid those things is through, Netflix and social
Yeah, that's
media.
right.
And like that's the way that we distract our minds from those things is instead of like confronting them and facing them, like we just go to that. I mean, and then as you get older, it becomes other things like, but it's I think it's really, really profound that you're able to do that in the woods and become comfortable with yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I do agree with you. Like, the stimulus of screen time and working behind a computer all day, like I think you do it's easy to get trapped in that space, right? And breaking that cycle and getting outside, whether it's just camping in the backyard with your kids
Mhm.
or walking on the greenway in the town that you live in, or, just finding a local trail. Like I do think it does wonders for your mind and for your spirit and your body, like it's just good all around.
Yeah. So as a kid, I mean, and you painted that picture. You had this specific moment when you were laying
Yeah,
in the woods watching the tree sway and you felt an inner peace. And then I heard you say you've been chasing that.
yeah. And that changed a little bit, in
Yeah.
my teenage years, as I think a lot of teenagers may be. You have this kind of feeling of maybe I'm invincible,
Mhm.
and I changed my outdoor pursuits to kind of like seeking adrenaline fueled
Yeah,
activities.
totally.
I did some trips to the New River Gorge, the Golly River in West Virginia, did some whitewater kayaking up there. We would go to the Nantahala Outdoor Center in Bryson City here
Mhm.
in North Carolina. I paddled that river a bunch. Like, so I was after that more kind of adrenaline
Yep.
rush, but it's still coming out the backside of those activities. I would still feel that like, okay, wow, like I filled my bucket up. You know what I mean? Like I'm feeling good now.
Yeah.
And that was really important to me too.
There's a sense of accomplishment that comes with those sort of things. It's almost like, you're beating the river, you're beating,
Yeah,
whatever it is that you take on.
that's right.
And it
That's
gives
right.
you a different feeling of confidence, really,
Yeah,
of
it
being
is.
able of
Yeah.
being
Different
capable.
stage of life.
Yeah, yeah. All
For
right.
sure.
So now, that was kind of childhood and the teenage years. Like, so what calls you to adventure now as an adult?
Yeah, so I think now that I'm married, I have kids, I'm very sensitive to the fact that I live in a big city, right?
Yes.
And I live in the suburb of a big city, and my kids can't go out that back door and hike 4 or 5 miles because they would be on a major road, or they'd be in somebody else's backyard, or like, so I'm very sensitive to finding activities for them that maybe would spark that sense of adventure, right? Like this, to see if they would like it, to see if, hey, let's get outside and try this, to kind of get away from the iPads and get away from the video games. I'm way more focused on sharing this adventure lifestyle with my family. We've got spring break coming up, and we're going to go back to Stone Mountain State Park and do some camping up there, just because it's such a special spot. And I want to share that with them. And I don't want to sound like I'm forcing this on them, but I want to provide that opportunity for them, and then they can make their own decisions on whether that speaks to them or not.
Yeah. You got to get them in the position to be able to lay in the dirt and look up at the trees and see them
That's right.
swaying and feel
That's
that
right.
peace for themselves, right?
Yeah, that's right. And both my kids are have the ability to they go to summer camp in the mountains every year, and I think it's there. Like I see them both come back from these summer camps, and they're like, I was outdoors, I was out in the woods the whole time, and it was amazing. So I think they enjoy it, but like you said, you just want to like provide them opportunities, and then hope they stick with it.
Yeah. So you've had some experiences as an adult that where you've sort of paired adventure with some other things. And so, some of the things that you've mentioned to me was, some experiences with your dad. You've talked about
Sure.
using adventure to overcome grief. Like, can you talk about some of those experiences?
Yeah, I sure can. And that, that really goes back to my younger years too. I think a lot of folks when they experience, something that's traumatic in their life, whether it be, something that happened at school, or, you broke up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, like, people deal with those experiences different ways, right? And my way of dealing with something, that was stressing me out or something bad happened was to get outdoors, because I knew that would flip the switch for me and kind of take me out of that place of like, oh, I'm feeling bad about myself. And that happened in high school. I had a breakup in high school, I had a breakup in college, and I would always take myself outside to like make myself feel better. One really, experience that was really hard for me was I lost my dad when I was 27 years old.
Yeah.
Just as I was kind of like starting my career and I was getting ready to get married, and kind of like I was entering that kind of like, really adult phase of my life. I lost him. He's 59 years old. It was really tough. Um, he had lung cancer, and it was a long, hard battle.
Yeah.
He right before he passed away, I think he kind of knew it was the end, and he kind of, he perked up for a couple of days, and he came to me and he was like, I want to like share a good meal and a bottle of wine. And I didn't say he was a man of a few words, but I could tell he wanted to like just do something, the two of us. And I was already in the wine industry, so he knew I loved wine. So I went and got a really special bottle of wine
Yeah.
from the Gill family. They're based in Spain. This bottle called El Nido. It's really hard to get.
Okay.
And so I sat down. I made a big plate of spaghetti for both of us. He loved spaghetti, and we drank this wine, and we didn't even say much, but just being with each other, it was sorry. It brings on emotion for me. It was important. Like it's cemented in my mind as like one of those like special moments with my dad. And so he passed away. I think it was either a day or two later, and months later, as I'm trying to like find my path through this grief, you know I'm thinking to myself, how am I gonna deal with this? And something spoke to me, like that bottle of wine, that symbolic glass of wine I shared with him. You know, I said to myself, I want to see where this was made. Like I want to go to this place, and I want to know everything about this one particular wine that he so enjoyed, that we both enjoyed together.
Yeah.
And I had the chance to travel to Southeast Spain in this little region. It's about 4.5 hours southeast of Madrid. And
Okay.
then when I say it's in the middle of nowhere, it is in the middle of nowhere. It kind of looks like the Monument Valley and out west. It's got these
Nice.
buttes, and it's kind of arid desert, and the the landscape is really cool. And out of nowhere, these big old knotty vines grow up out of the desert, drill holes through bedrock 40 feet deep for these vines to go down and find water. So it's this really unique thing. And so I went and I visited this place, and I met the winemaker, and I told him the story about my dad. And, we shared a moment there. And I came back, and, and I think I was peeling kind of those layers back
Yes.
from this grief that I'd been dealing with.
Yeah.
And this was years later after my dad passed away. And I think that really, like, having that chance to hike through these vineyards and being out in nature, like it helped heal me in a way.
Yeah.
So really, really special moment for me.
Yeah. It sounds like it. And it just sounds like, again, you were able to go back to that place of peace in that nature,
That's right.
but it kind of, again, kind of brought you back to those like comfortable feelings of childhood.
Yeah, it really
Really.
did. It really did.
One thing I just wanted to kind of ask you about, because you said uh, when you were trying to make that decision is going to find out where the wine was made, you said
Mhm.
something spoke to me.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, can you kind of elaborate on what that was like? I mean, was it like a feeling inside, or was it like a voice you heard, or?
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like, anytime, and this has kind of been a constant in my life, like I will get myself, I wouldn't say a rut because my life is not a rut. I have a great life. I really do enjoy my life, but I get myself into a pattern, and maybe it's the things that I know I need to do, but maybe it's not all the things I want to do all the time, right? Like I want to be outdoors and stuff. And so it's like it builds up, it builds this feeling up in myself. And then I'm like, okay, you know what? I got to like scratch the itch. I got to get out and do this for myself. And I felt that with going to Spain, it was unavoidable. Like I would think about it and then it would, I would go about my daily life. And but over time it just kept popping up. Like, and then it was popping up like on a daily basis, like, Matt, you got to do this. You have to go and see this place and experience where this thing came from, because I think subconsciously I knew I needed to heal, and I knew that was going to be part of the healing process for me.
Mhm.
And so, like a lot of other things, adventures I've had, like I just knew I needed to do it, and I
Mhm.
knew that if I didn't do it, it was just going to keep like presenting itself
Yeah.
until I did it. Right?
Yeah.
If that makes
That's
sense.
kind of, yeah, no, it totally does. I mean, it was sort of repeated. It wasn't just like a one-time thing. It sort of kept coming back to you.
That's right.
And I think this is part of the hero's journey, right? We have this, we get these callings, and then sometimes we sort of resist them. And I guess like for that one in particular, did you experience any like doubting thoughts or fears that were like, oh no, I can't do that?
Yeah, I did. I did because I think I was probably scared
Yeah.
to maybe what sort of emotions that I was going to provoke from me when I was finally there. I think that I really felt compelled to go, but I think I think with any big adventure, I think there's probably you're a little bit nervous because it's outside of your norm, like what your normal life is, and I think it's easy to compress that and say, okay, I'm going to put it off because maybe I'm not ready yet, or maybe I'm not physically ready for the challenge. But you know what? Sometimes you just gotta roll the dice and go, man. Just
Yeah.
gotta do it.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, like in the face of, and I think that's what courage is, right? But in the
Yeah,
face of those fears and doubts, you just decided to go anyway.
that's right.
And so, like, I mean, did any of those fears that you had like come to fruition? Like, what
Yeah,
happened when you actually got there?
I think probably what I was most fearful of was just confronting my grief.
Yep.
Um, because I think I had just been chipping away at over the years since his passing, and I knew I needed to take a big chunk of it out. I needed to like continue to heal. And I was very nervous just reliving those memories in the place where this wine was born and grown and produced. And I think once I was there and once I kind of like spent a few hours out in this vineyard, just like processing where I was and how impactful this was on my life, I think I felt a lot better coming out the backside of it. And I shared a lot of it with my wife when I got home, and you know, it was important. It was important to do, but it was really scary, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was an adventure and it was healing.
That's right.
And so I think it's interesting how so much of this ties together. And I want to see if we can connect some dots here, because you've got
Sure.
this adventure spirit. You went on this healing adventure,
Yeah.
but it happened to be in the wine industry, which is the business that you chose to go in. And so I kind of want to just go real quick to that sort of transition where you were working in a corporate role and just decided that you were going to make this big leap of faith and get into the wine business and
Yeah.
become a small business entrepreneur. Because sometimes adventure isn't just about going out into the woods. Sometimes adventure is like taking a leap of faith like that. So
No.
I'm curious, you just share a little bit about that adventure of making that transition from a corporate job into an entrepreneurial venture.
Yeah, no, and I do agree with you. Like adventure comes in many different forms, right? I worked in corporate America. I think that the job I had and the amount of work I was putting in, like I knew that was probably just for me, not something I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Hmm.
And I knew that I needed to challenge myself in other ways. My business partner was actually my wife's next door neighbor in a condo complex they lived in before we got
Nice.
married. and he had moved down from Washington, D.C. to start this wine retail concept. And, one night we were just hanging out and he's telling me about it. And he had gotten the store started.
Yep.
And, you talk about that call to adventure, that sense of adventure.
Yeah.
That spoke to me. I was like, whoa, I got to find a way to get involved with this, because I felt bogged down by my job. And we talked about earlier, like, it was almost like an itch I needed to scratch, something to where the work I'm putting in, I can see the results of my own hard work. And I needed to take that leap of faith for myself so I could build this, because I could build this thing for myself and see, where it took me. Right. I do have to say that without Margaret, my wife, I would not have been able to do this. Like, she is always my rock, but really during that time, it was super beneficial to me to have her to say, you know what, follow your dreams, follow this thing that you got to do for yourself, to make this leap of faith to help start this business. And, and I'm glad I did. Like, it's been a lot of work. It's been really hard, but I've never felt bored in this pursuit, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's always been adventure, and it's an ever-changing industry. And I never feel like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Well, this is so boring. Like, it's always something that's keeping me glued to it.
I love it. I want to give a shout out to your wife, because Margaret is an incredibly strong and brave human being, and she inspires me. And so it's funny, because I was kind of, as you were talking, formulating a question in my head, and I was going to ask you, how did you know when you said you got that call? It was like a calling, like, I want to get involved in this.
Yeah.
But then you went on to say that if it wasn't for Margaret. And so it kind of made me realize, like, sometimes you hear the call to adventure, but you have these fears and doubts. And thankfully, sometimes there's somebody standing right there next to you to help you see it.
That's exactly right. I try to do the same thing with my kids too. Like, if they're thinking about trying a new sport, or like, I try to be the best I can to promote that sense of, hey, step outside your comfort zone, take a chance. Even if you don't get the results that you're looking for, at least you tried, right?
Sometimes we have a hard time hearing that call to adventure. Sometimes we get it and we just don't pay attention to it, or we just don't listen, right? Like,
No, it's right.
what do you have to do to hear that call?
I think it's important to say too, anytime that I'm like, whether it's a small adventure, whether I'm like camping with my kids, or whether I'm, mountain biking or doing something, like, I try, when I'm done with that activity, I literally tell myself, remember how good this feels, right? Remember how the time you spent with your kids, like, how impactful that might be on their lives. Certainly how impactful it was on my life. I think it's really important to, like, remember that. So next time you're feeling timid about, like, oh gosh, I've got too much work, or maybe, I just don't have the time to do these things, like, you got to do it, right? You got to go out there and make time for it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I guess I'm curious in terms of how you're sharing these kinds of life lessons, like, with your children. Like, what are some of the things that you're doing to sort of instill some of this in them?
Yeah. I mean, I think, for me, it's I think with any generation, our kids' generation, like, they deal with self-esteem issues, self-confidence, like, finding their way in the world. Who am I? I think when you personally, this is a personal opinion, when you strip away some of the things that cause anxiety, whether it's, teenagers and social media or screen time, like video games, like, when you can strip away some of that stimulus, I think it provides kids and adults really a path to see their own selves clearer, right?
Yeah.
And I think that getting outside and following this pursuit of adventure, like, you learn a lot about yourself by doing those things. And I think the end goal for me is to continue to help build my kids' self-confidence so they can figure out who they are and who they want to be.
Yeah.
And then they can make an impact in this world.
I think that's fabulous. And I do want to pull in real quick because I know that, the last couple of years, it's been hard to go on adventures and to do things because of COVID. But I
Yes.
happen to know that you figured something else out to kind of create that adventure spirit at home and truly find adventure in your backyard.
Yeah.
What did you do to get through COVID?
Yeah. So to your point, like I'm getting that itch. I got to scratch, right? Like I'm like, oh man, I got to get outside. I want to do this. I want to do that. And we took the leap and built this cabin in our backyard. This guy, Kurt, who's done a bunch of house projects for us, he's a big outdoor guy too. And so I pitched this idea to him. I was like, I want to build a cabin in the backyard of my Charlotte, North Carolina house. And he was like, you're crazy, but I love it. Let's do it.
Yep.
And so I built this, 18 by 20 structure. It's got a shed roof. It's, southern pine on the inside. We've stained it to look like reclaimed wood. It's got a wood burning stove in it, and there's no TV. There probably will not be any computers or electronics. I do have a record player. That is my one piece of technology in there, but it is our place to retreat to. Like and I told this to my kids and my wife, I'm like, if you're feeling like, like it's just too much, like something's going on in my life that's just too much, like use that as a place to go and relax and take a step out of your routine to, to just kind of like take a deep breath. Right. And we do that. We play board games down there. We share meals. We have a fire pit right outside of it. This is our space. This is our safe space, and our little cutout right here in our backyard. So 20 feet from the back door.
And that's the important part right here. This is not, you guys aren't living on a 10-acre farm. This is like you said, it's like what, 20, 30 feet from the backyard. Or from the back of the house.
Right. I did want to make a point that, the whole, like, I don't want screen time out there. Like I want it to be somewhere where we can talk to each other. Right. Yeah. And talk about memories of the family, or like what we want to do, like our dreams about what we want to do as a family. And, I think that's important to keep those open lines of communication and have a place to do that.
What an awesome space.
Yeah.
And maybe if we're lucky, you'll share a couple pictures we can put in the show notes so that listeners can take a look and be inspired. Well, man, you inspire me. I just love your story and how you bring your childhood back into what you're doing as an adult. I'd love to just kind of get your advice for people that might be listening that do have that call to adventure, but maybe they experience some of those same fears and doubts and, tell themselves, well, I can't do that. Like what advice would you have for people like that?
Yeah, I would say, anything that's outside of your comfort zone might be a little scary, right? I would say take the leap. If you're worried about failing, or you're worried that it might not be what you thought it was, like there's only one way to find out, and if you keep that open mind of what this venture might be, even if it's a less than stellar experience, or you don't achieve your goal, what you had set out for yourself, I guarantee you'll pull something away from it that you can find as a positive, something that you can bring back with you and say, I learned something else about myself, or I learned, what it takes to finish the task, or, I think it's really important to just go for it. Because in the end, it sounds a little cheesy. Like we got one life, right? Like we've got one trip around this crazy world. And like, I want to, when I'm an old man and I, unfortunately, maybe will be too old to still go hiking and stuff, I want to look back and say, you know what, I did not pass up any opportunity to pursue that life of adventure.
Yeah, I love that, man. I love that so much. And you've inspired me for sure to add some things to my list. I'm going up Mount LeConte sometime with those llamas. I can't wait to do that.
Yes.
And we'll do some trips together for sure. But let's wrap this up. I've got two questions I ask everybody that comes on the podcast. And first is, when they make a movie about your life, because Hollywood's going to do that. You've done some pretty incredible things. I want to know who the Hollywood actor is going to be that's going to play you in this movie.
I like George Clooney. I mean, that might be
yeah, man.
that
That's
might be a
perfect.
stretch. That
What
might
a
be a
great
stretch.
answer. Yeah, buddy. I
This
love it.
George Clooney, always cool, calm, and collected. Like I feel like every movie he's in, he always has like somebody asks a question, he's got the perfect answer for it. No, I'm always aspiring to be the cool, calm, and collected guy. I'm not always that guy, but that's what I'm always trying to work.
You nailed it, man. You nailed it. I love it. Oh, that's awesome. So what's your movie going to be called?
Get Outside.
Get Outside, man. Speaking my language. I love it. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being here. And for those listening, I hope you have been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Matt's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell, or if you even need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside, as Matt's movie is called. Thank you for listening. Matt, thank you so much for being here, my friend.
Yeah, Scott, really appreciate it. I'm feeling inspired as well.